I hope you had a fantastic first day. There were some very, very good sessions, as you all know, some great workshops, good conversation from stage, and from what I could tell, good conversation in the hallways, at the reception, at the dinner last night. So we hope this has been a very productive start for you, and we have one half of the day left that I think is going to wrap it up and bring it home and be a very, very productive couple days overall here in Istanbul. We're going to get started right away into things with our second plenary session, Inclusive Sustainable Development, led by Sustainable Partnerships, Ethical Investment, and Intelligent Resource Management. Our moderator for this session is BBC News anchor, Mr. David Eads. David became a presenter on BBC World News in 2003, following a decade of frontline news correspondent for BBC Television and BBC Radio. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the host of this session this morning, Mr. David Eads. David?
Jim, thanks very much indeed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for joining us here for this session. Plenary Session 2. I'm going to run through the title because it's quite a mouthful. Inclusive Sustainable Development, led by Sustainable Partnerships, Ethical Investment, and Intelligent Resource Management in the tourism sector. Just a couple of words from me as a journalist. It's a cliche, but they do say the business of business is business. It is hard-headed, it is competitive, it is about making money, it's about making a profit, and that is obviously, as you would know, as true for tourism as it is in any other sector. And it seems to me that tourism, nonetheless, offers some of the best examples for explaining why business, the business of business, must be good business, must be sustainable business. We can all pick examples out of the air of classic tourism failures, from the Kerala Islands to Peru to my own back doorstep, Stonehenge in England. There are plenty of examples on that level. And similarly, whether it's on ethical grounds, social grounds, governance issues, sustainability is key. And I know you all know that. I was intrigued by some Economist Intelligence Unit research earlier this year, which pointed out that chief executives in developing countries are far more aware of the importance of sustainability in business than their counterparts in the developed world, regardless of the financial luxuries that they might have to think more about those opportunities. I'm also told that that's a good thing, because if we all lived like Europeans, we'd need 3 planets to live on. If we all lived like Americans, we'd need 5 planets to live on. So it's the here and now that things have to change. But obviously one of the great risks to sustainable business, to sustainable tourism, it seems to me, and it's something that we will address here this morning, is the question of short-termism, of that need to make the money, the need, this quarterly figures culture that we seem to live in, and how we get round that. So we will also be looking at what I think really is the key question: how to make sure tourism is sustainable, inclusive, and what are the ways, the means, and the partnerships that you can find to make that happen. We have a very distinguished group of speakers on the panel to help us work our way through that, and I'll introduce them one by one as they come up to speak, starting with Jeffrey Lippman. Now, Professor Lippman is the chair of greenearth.travel and also advisor to the Secretary General of the UNWTO, Taleb Rifai, former Assistant Secretary General himself at the UNWTO, and the first President of the World Travel and Tourism Council. So, Jeffrey, I think you want to touch on some green issues for us and the potential. Thank you.
Well, good morning. It's nice to see so many people make it on the second day of any conference. I have calculated, after listening to everybody yesterday, that I am the 71st speaker at this conference, and if you attended the other meeting that the group of 9 put together, I'm the 101st. And I am told that this is like being Zaza Gabor's 8th husband on the wedding night. How do you make it remembered? And the second thing is we have 8 minutes in which to explain whatever it was you just described as this title. And I can only describe this as someone once told me that Woody Allen said that he took up speed reading, and this morning he read War and Peace, and he thinks it's about Russia. So I've decided to tell you what my central point is immediately, and that central point is that if we could effectively leverage this sector in the green growth era, the benefits to the LDCs will be massive, and new style of PPPs will emerge, which will be pivotal and inevitable. That's the thought I want to leave you with, because I think we're playing around the edges. With all due respect to everybody, including the coordination group and the UN system, if you really want to make that change, it has to be something much more significant. Now, I've been allowed a slide. Thank you, Patricia. I've been allowed one slide, and it's kind of contextual, and I think if I press this, I can change. I was pretty cunning because it's actually two slides. I put a second piece underneath. This is a very complicated diagram, but I like to show it because everybody talks about green growth, but nobody really seems to have said precisely what is green growth that we're talking about. And if you look at that slide, you'll see on the left-hand side all of these big issues that the heads of states have agreed they have to deal with together, because dealing with them separately doesn't work. And then the ones in white underneath, I'm not going to go through them, these are the ones on the horizon. And you go to any important summit conference, you listen to any leader speaking yesterday, and they're all talking about this kind of framework. You will see that there is a swoosh to 2050 with some targets online. We don't actually have to do green growth tomorrow, folks. We have to do green growth by 2050. And the only reason we have to do it by 2050 is there's a finite in there, and the finite is the 2 degrees. Every other aspect of the sustainability syndrome doesn't have a number to it. But the climate issue has a number to it, and if we don't fix it or fix it thereabouts, everybody in this room's grandchildren is going to freeze or frizzle. The other thing is, on the right-hand side, and you may not be able to see it at the back of the room, but I've tried to encapsulate, I think if you haven't read Tom Friedman's book, Hot, Flat and Crowded, you should read it. Because basically he says that the essence of green growth is we need to use less black energy from hell, coal and oil. We need to use much more clean energy from heaven, which he calls from heaven, solar and wind and all of those things. We need to use information technology and energy technology together, because the transactional changes that will occur over this time will be so immense. If we don't get the technology together, we won't be able to achieve it. We need to do this with social inclusion, and we need to do it whilst conserving biodiversity. And if that seems complex, on the background is a mosaic. And I took this from a speech that Achim Steiner gave somewhere, and he said that it's like building a mosaic over 40 years, because every place, every community, every family starts from a different position with different circumstances, and the game is we all have to get to the same place by 2050. And I apologize for taking all that time, but there are 2 key points on there. The one on the bottom, this means that everything changes: production, consumption, investment, markets. And if we talk about less than that, we're fooling ourselves, because we won't hit 2 degrees. And the other point, which is critically important for the LDCs, is that there are going to be trillions of dollars for transformation. I say trillions because over 40 years, if you take 100 billion a year, there is a lot of money. And the name of the game is to use it wisely, and I think tourism is a sector which can do that. Now I have the second part. That's even more complex. So complex it's gone. I talk about travelism because when we talk about tourism, we so often talk about a piece of the exercise. We talk about hospitality. Nobody talked about airlines yesterday, and yet without aviation, and there's no aviation on the group of 9, ICAO is not there, Without aviation, there is no international tourism to LDCs. And I think aviation has been slammed unfairly. They will fix their carbon problem. They'll fix it like everybody else. And we've allowed certain groups and some academics to paint the airlines into a corner when it's the very thing that LDCs need. I'm not going to go into that slide. The point of it is we see the top of the iceberg. Underneath is the bottom of the iceberg with all of those elements, trade, development, and down at the bottom, understanding and happiness. In terms of Sarkozynomics, you know, happiness is a key issue. Now, I need to come to an end of what I'm going to say, and I've spent most of my time talking about these slides. So I'm going to say three things. First of all, our sector is going to be mainstreamed. There's no question about it. The global green growth agenda will take root. The BRICS and China particularly will be determinant factors, and Chinese travel and tourism will be a critical element, and we have to get it to move from China to those two big places, Africa and the Asian LDCs. And we will hit the low-carbon lifestyle, this sector, so we should not get too bogged down about that. And what that means in terms of PPPs is the following. Old-style PPPs, where the government owns key elements of the market process and invites and incentivizes the private sector to collaborate and bring finance, will have been good incubators, but they won't stay the green growth course, except for perhaps major infrastructure like toll roads or security-related PPPs for border services or air traffic control. Governments don't have the money or the management skills, and the private sector needs the flexibility with fair oversight to make fast decisions and to inject where needed and repatriate funds in tune with market economy. We need to be thinking about new forms of collaboration, web-centric, interactive, dynamic PPPs, like when Microsoft, Skype, or Apple, Google, or Visa want to create e-visas, or local travel services with social media, or maximizing export promotion. The public sector will progressively, lightly regulate and establish safety nets. The private sector will increasingly implement, deal with the market, and follow tough CSR standards. And multi-stakeholder collaboration, true multi-stakeholder collaboration, where you bring the stakeholders in at the beginning, will be the name of the game, with the local community at the core and civil society at the table. Two last points. Non-travelism PPPs on infrastructure, agriculture, communications, renewables, microcredit, a fair game for the tourism sector to get involved in, and we should get involved in it. And the second point, travelism PPPs themselves should have two core green growth principles. The first one is what I call quadruple bottom line. It's the old triple bottom line of economic, social, and environmental, with climate at the front, because climate is not a subset of any of them. And the second thing is, travel will become increasingly smart, clean, green, ethical, and quality. So, three takeaway points. Let's change the narrative. An upfront statement from here on benefits of green growth travelism for LD transformation would be a great start. Look to China, rural regeneration, and renewable energy, and make links of this with tourism circuits, and look for funding from that massive climate adaptation and poverty money. And last but not least, think cross-sector fertilization and massive public-private financing incentives. Thank you.